I won't pretend I planned this trip well. I'll admit that right away. My goal was simple. Get away from everything, spend a weekend in the wilderness, and clear my thoughts. The remote forests of Maine sounded like the perfect escape. I didn't even bother booking a cabin or campsite, just tossed my gear into the trunk and hit the road. By the time I reached the trailhead, it was almost 5:30 p.m., way later than I had expected. The parking lot was empty, not a single other vehicle in sight. The sign at the trail entrance said it was a 5-hour trek to the nearest shelter. 5 hours. I figured if I moved fast, I'd make it by 10, maybe 10:30. I had a flashlight and I was running on pure determination, so I wasn't too concerned. Still, something about that empty lot sent a shiver down my spine. The first part of the hike was peaceful. The cool air smelled of pine, and the towering trees formed a thick canopy overhead. My boots crunched against the dirt path, the only sound in the stillness. Too still, I realize now. No birds, no wind rustling the leaves, just me. 2 hours in, the sun had started dipping below the treetops, casting the forest in a dull gray. I paused to rest, leaning against a mossy rock and taking a sip of water. That's when I heard it. A faint crunch, like a footstep on dried leaves. My stomach clenched. I froze, my water bottle halfway to my lips, and listened. Silence. Just the distant hum of insects and the occasional shifting of foliage. Probably a deer, I reassured myself. Maybe some small animal. But when I swung my flashlight around, its beams sliced through the trees and illuminated. Nothing. Relax, I muttered under my breath, shaking off the nerves. It was just my imagination. I pushed off the rock and kept walking, quickening my pace as the woods darkened around me. By the 3rd hour, it was pitch black. My flashlight was my only source of light, casting a narrow glow that felt painfully insufficient. The trees seemed different now, gnarled, their twisted trunks forming shadows that played tricks on my mind. Every so often, I swore I heard something, a faint rustling, the snap of a twig, but every time I stopped and swung my light around, there was nothing. I told myself it was just the woods messing with me, just my mind filling in the silence with imagined noises. But the feeling that I wasn't alone wouldn't go away. A creeping, crawling sensation along the back of my neck made my skin prickle. Then, at the 4-hour mark, I heard it again. This time, it wasn't subtle. A sharp crack, something stepping on a branch. My pulse spiked. I spun around, gripping my flashlight tightly, its beam trembling as I held it out. The light landed on a cluster of trees, their shadows stretching like skeletal fingers. "Hello!" My voice came out weak. It sounded absurd in the vast emptiness. No response. But then, in my peripheral vision, something moved. A flicker of motion, a shadow darting behind a tree. "Hey!" I called out, more from instinct than courage. My voice was swallowed by the night. My heart hammered in my chest as I aimed my flashlight at the spot where I had seen movement. But nothing was there. I backed away, my footsteps crunching against the dirt trail. The flashlight beam swung wildly, but the darkness was too thick. My breath came in ragged, uneven gasps. And then it happened. A scream, high-pitched, distorted, and impossibly loud. It tore through the forest like a jagged blade, echoing in every direction. I froze, my muscles locking up. It wasn't human. It wasn't an animal. It was wrong. I don't remember choosing to run. One moment I was standing there, the next I was sprinting. My legs burned as I tore down the path, my flashlight bouncing wildly. Behind me, I heard heavy, deliberate footsteps. Something was chasing me. I didn't dare look back. The footsteps stopped suddenly, but I didn't. I kept running, desperate to get as far away as possible. My lungs screamed for air, my thoughts racing with questions I didn't want answers to. When I finally couldn't run anymore, I veered off the path and collapsed behind a massive fallen log. My chest heaved. I switched off my flashlight and crouched low, gripping it like a weapon. The darkness was suffocating. My ears strained for any sound. Then soft, deliberate footsteps, this time circling the log I was hiding behind. My jaw clenched, my breath stilled. The footsteps stopped on the other side of the trunk. Something heavy scraped against the bark. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to disappear. Silence. I stayed there for what felt like hours. My legs ached from crouching, my fingers numb around the flashlight. The sounds hadn't completely vanished. There were still small noises, twigs snapping, leaves shifting. Whatever it was, it hadn't left. It was waiting. And then, a whisper, low, guttural, barely audible. My blood ran cold. It wasn't words exactly, but it had the shape of human speech, jagged, strained, like it hurt to say. The whisper came again, closer this time. I fumbled for the flashlight. Every instinct told me not to turn it on, but I had to see. My fingers, slick with sweat, found the switch. I counted to 3, held my breath, and flicked it on. The beam sliced through the blackness, and for a split second, I wished I hadn't done it. A figure crouched just feet away. Its face was obscured, hidden by a hood or tangled hair. I couldn't tell. Its body was bent at an unnatural angle, one arm bracing against the ground, the other stretched toward me. The second the light hit its face, it recoiled, letting out a low hiss. Its movements were jerky, like a marionette on twisted strings. Then, it scrambled backward into the shadows, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. Couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. My flashlight wavered as I frantically searched for any sign of it. Nothing, just the oppressive dark. I had to leave. I forced myself to stand, my legs nearly buckling beneath me. The fog had crept in while I was hiding, thick and suffocating. My flashlight barely cut through it. Every tree looked the same. The whispers still drifted in and out of the mist. Then I found it, clearing. At first, I thought it was the shelter, but as I got closer, my stomach dropped. In the center, branches were arranged in a perfect circle, strange symbols carved into each one. In the middle of the circle, a hole, deep, fresh, big enough to fit a person. Footprints, bare, human, large and staggering, led from the hole to the tree line. My heart pounded. I spun around, expecting to see glowing eyes staring at me, but the woods were empty. For now, I turned and ran. Branches lashed at me, roots threatened to trip me, but I didn't stop. When I saw the trailhead, I nearly cried with relief. My car was there, just as I left it. But as I got closer, I saw it. A muddy handprint on the driver's side window, fingers impossibly long, fresh. I didn't think. I threw myself into the car, locked the doors, and jammed the key into the ignition with shaking hands. When the engine roared to life, I floored it. In my rearview mirror, I saw it, a figure standing at the forest's edge, its head tilted, watching. Its glowing eyes were the last thing I saw before the road curved, taking me away from that place. I didn't stop driving until I was halfway home. Even now, I don't know what I saw, but I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back. The Pacific Northwest had always drawn me in. Its thick forests and mist-covered peaks felt more like home than my cramped apartment back east. This trip was meant to be a break, a chance to breathe after years of non-stop work and stress. It started off exactly as I'd hoped. Crisp mountain air, winding roads stretching endlessly, and a solitude that finally let me think clearly for the first time in ages. But then Jake arrived in Ashford, and something shifted. He stepped off the bus looking awful, pale, like he hadn't slept in days. I figured it was just the exhaustion from travel or his usual complaints about being out in the wild. But there was something else, a nervous energy like he was on edge. "This place feels wrong," he muttered as I tossed his bag into the trunk. He kept glancing around, as if someone might be watching us, but the parking lot was empty except for an old, rusted sedan. "Yeah, weirdly beautiful," I joked, hoping to lighten his mood. "You'll love it once we get out there." He didn't. The whole drive to the cabin, Jake barely spoke. He just stared out the window, like the trees were pressing in on us. And honestly, the forest did feel denser than usual, almost alive. I told myself it was just the low-hanging clouds or the early dusk, But by the time we pulled up to the cabin, even I felt uneasy. It wasn't much. A weathered old place that smelled faintly of dust and mildew, with warped floorboards and a sagging roof that looked like it had barely survived the last storm. "Charming," I said, trying to sound cheerful as I unlocked the door. "That's code for haunted," Jake muttered, tossing his bag onto the couch. He wasn't joking, though. The look he gave me made my stomach knot. Inside, the place was even smaller than the photos had made it seem. A single dim light buzzed in the living room, and the kitchen was little more than a counter with an outdated stovetop. The windows were small, and when I peeked out, all I saw was forest. A wall of dark green stretching endlessly in every direction. We unpacked in silence. Jake kept checking his phone, even though we both knew there wouldn't be service out here. He had this habit of pacing when he was anxious, and by the time I'd finished settling in, he'd already worn a path into the thin carpet. "What's wrong?" I finally asked, keeping my voice light. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "This place just feels off." "Off how?" He shrugged. "I don't know, like we're being watched or something." I rolled my eyes, but his words struck a nerve. I hadn't admitted it to myself yet, but the air inside the cabin was heavy, almost suffocating. And the silence, it wasn't peaceful. It was tense. That night, we sat by the fireplace, eating canned soup. I laid out plans for hikes and scenic drives for the next day, but Jake barely acknowledged me. He just stared at the flames, his jaw clenched. "Maybe we should leave tomorrow," he said suddenly. "What? No, we just got here." I tried to laugh, but it sounded forced. "Come on, it's not that bad. You'll feel better after a good night's sleep." He didn't argue, which was unlike him. Usually, Jake would push back just for the sake of it. But tonight, he just nodded, still staring into the fire like he was afraid to look away. As we were getting ready for bed, he broke the silence again. "Hey, what was that thing you mentioned earlier? That legend?" I hesitated. "You mean the forest keepers?" "Yeah, that. What's the deal?" "It's just a local story," I said quickly. "People say the woods are protected, that you're not supposed to disrespect the land or what?" I hesitated. "Or call attention to yourself." Jake raised an eyebrow. "How do you call attention? There's a name you're not supposed to say." He smirked, and I knew immediately what he was about to do. "Don't," I started, but it was too late. He said it loud and clear, almost like a challenge. Immediately, the air felt colder, as if a draft had swept through, though the windows were shut tight. "Jake," I snapped, sharper than I intended. "That's not funny. Relax. It's just a story," he said, but his smirk was gone. He glanced at the window, his shoulders stiff. The rest of the night passed in silence. I fell asleep easily enough, worn out from the long drive, but Jake stayed up. I woke once, around midnight, to the sound of him pacing. "You okay?" I mumbled. "Go back to sleep," he muttered. I did, but not before noticing how he kept glancing at the windows, his face pale in the dim light. When he shook me awake, I thought it was time for our hike. "Get up," he hissed, his voice shaking. "We have to go." "What time is it?" I mumbled, reaching for my phone, but his hand grabbed mine, stopping me. "No, now, get up." It took a moment for my groggy brain to process the way his jaw was clenched, how wide his eyes were. Jake was skeptical, sarcastic, never scared. But now, he was shaking. "Jake," I whispered, my throat dry. "What happened?" "I can't explain it. Not here. Just pack your stuff." I started to argue, but something in his expression shut me up. My pulse spiked, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. He tossed his clothes into his bag carelessly, eyes darting to the door like he expected something to come through it at any second. "Did you hear something outside?" I asked. Jake froze mid-step. "Yes," he whispered, "but it wasn't normal." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Not now," he snapped. "Just move faster." We threw our bags into the car. The cold hit me first, sharper than before. My breath fogged the air as I climbed into the passenger seat. Jake fumbled with the keys, his hands trembling so badly it took him 3 tries to start the car. The headlights cut through the darkness, but beyond them, the forest loomed, endless and waiting. As we sped down the road, I finally asked, "What happened back there?" Jake swallowed hard. I was trying to sleep, but I kept hearing tapping. First at the window, then the wall, then the door. I shivered. "An animal?" He shook his head. "Too deliberate." And then I heard whispers. I went still. Whispers. "Yeah." His voice was barely above a whisper itself now. At first, just the wind, but they got louder, like they were circling the cabin. Then, the footsteps. A chill crawled up my back. Footsteps. They were outside at first. Then, they climbed onto the roof. I gripped the door handle, my pulse hammering. "You didn't see anything?" "No," he admitted. "But I felt it, like they were right there, watching." I swallowed hard, but before I could say anything else, Jake's knuckles went white on the wheel. "Do you see that?" he whispered. 2 headlights had appeared behind us, sudden, impossibly close. But as fast as they had appeared, they vanished. And ahead, standing in the road, was the stag. It was enormous, unmoving, watching, and somewhere, in the whispering wind, I knew we weren't alone. The forest had been watching, and this time it had let us leave. There's a stillness in the Montana wilderness that feels like stepping into another world. No traffic, no voices, no deadlines. Just towering pines stretching endlessly, their tops swaying gently in the breeze. This was exactly what I needed. A break, a reset. I pulled into the gravel lot at the trailhead, slung my pack over my shoulders, and tightened my boots. The cold air nipped at my face, making me feel awake, present. I checked my map, folded it up, and set off down the narrow path. The crunch of my boots against the dirt was the only sound in the otherwise silent woods. This place was different. No distant hikers, no trail markers at every turn, just untouched wilderness stretching in every direction. I embraced the solitude, relishing the rare sense of freedom that city life could never provide. The first few miles were uneventful. A squirrel skittered across the path, a hawk glided overhead. I stopped briefly to adjust my pack and take a sip of water, letting the quiet of the forest seep into my bones. That's when I noticed something in the trees, just to my right. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. The way the sun filtered through the branches often created strange patterns, turning shadows into illusions. But as I focused, I realized it wasn't a shadow. It was a figure, a man, standing completely still between the trees. Something about him felt wrong. His limbs seemed unnaturally long, his arms hanging loosely at his sides. He faced me, or at least I thought he did. The details were hard to make out in the dappled light, but his face looked smooth, blank. No eyes, no mouth, just skin where features should be. I froze. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe he was wearing a mask? Maybe a hunter? But who stands that still, not even blinking? "Hey!" I called out, my voice feeling too loud in the silent woods. No response, no movement, just that faceless stare. My pulse hammered as I took a step back, my fingers gripping my pack straps. I blinked, and he was gone. Not walking away, just gone, like he had never been there at all. I stared at the empty space where he'd stood, my rational mind grasping for explanations. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the forest was playing tricks on me. Shaking it off, I forced myself to keep moving, though my steps felt heavier now, the woods around me darker, quieter. When it came time to set up camp, I chose a spot off the trail, far from where I'd seen him, just in case. By the time my tent was pitched, the sky had faded to deep shades of orange and purple. I ate quickly, some freeze-dried meal that tasted like cardboard but filled my stomach. As the first stars appeared, exhaustion took hold, and I crawled into my tent, zipping it up tight. Night in the forest is different, so silent it's almost loud. Every rustle of leaves, Every distant snap of a branch felt amplified. I lay there, listening to my own breathing, trying to convince myself I was alone. At some point, I drifted off. I don't know how long I slept, but when I woke, I felt the cold first. The air inside the tent was freezing, brushing against my face like an open window. That's when I realized the door was open. Not just unzipped a little, wide open. My breath caught. My pulse pounded in my ears. Had I forgotten to close it? Had I heard something earlier and ignored it? I fumbled for my flashlight and shone it outside. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing only the thick trees around my camp. Nothing moved. No footprints. No signs of anything or anyone. I sat there for what felt like hours, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just a mistake. I've been tired, careless. That had to be it, right? I zipped the tent back up, triple-checking this time, and lay back down. But sleep didn't come easy. By morning, the unease still clung to me. As I packed up, the forest felt heavier, like the trees were pressing in, listening. Back on the trail, the overcast sky cast long, shifting shadows. Every so often, I glanced over my shoulder, expecting what? I didn't know. But the path behind me was always empty, until I saw it. A bundle of sticks, tied tightly with twine, lying in the center of the trail. It wasn't large, maybe the size of my forearm, but the sticks had been bent and woven into a crude human shape. My chest tightened. Someone had made this, and recently it hadn't been there yesterday. I nudged it with my boot, half expecting it to fall apart. Didn't. The bindings were tight. Just some weird camper. I muttered to myself, my voice sounding small. But who would leave something like this in the middle of nowhere? And why? I kicked it into the brush and kept moving, but the air felt colder now, the silence more oppressive. Every snap of a twig made me jump. Every rustle of leaves had me scanning the trees. By late afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When I stopped to set up camp, I picked a spot even farther from the trail. I worked fast, hands shaking as I drove the stakes into the ground. The sun was sinking fast, and I didn't want to be caught in the dark. That night, I lit a small fire, hoping it would calm me. Didn't. The flames flickered, casting shifting shadows that didn't feel right. Movement, just at the edge of the firelight. A shape slipping between the trees. My breath hitched. "Hello," I called, voice unsteady. Nothing. I swept my flashlight across the trees. The beam cut through the dark. Nothing but bark and leaves. But still, I knew. I wasn't alone. I doused the fire and retreated to my tent, zipping it tight, double-checking every seam. Clutching my knife, I lay there, heart racing. Then I saw them. Two faint, glowing points of light, high up in the trees directly ahead. Eyes watching me. They never blinked, never moved, just stared. I gripped my knife, my palms slick with sweat. I barely breathed. When the first light of dawn crept into the tent, they vanished. I stepped outside, breath hitching. On the ground in front of my tent was another bundle of sticks. But this time, it wasn't a crude figure. It was an X, a warning. I didn't eat. I didn't rest. I packed my gear as fast as I could and hit the trail, eyes darting to every shadow. I just needed to get back to my car. An hour passed, maybe two. Then I heard it, a crunch behind me. I spun. Nothing. Then a rock landed on the path. Deliberate, purposeful. I ran. When I reached the parking lot, I almost collapsed in relief. But then I saw it. Through my car window on the driver's seat, one of my shirts. Torn, stained dark, and next to it another X made of sticks. I fumbled for my keys, flung open the door, and sped off. As I left, I saw him, standing at the tree line, watching. I don't know what he was. I just know I'll never go back. And even now, as I write this, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still not alone. Of course, it was Jason's idea. It always was. One last adventure before summer ends, he had said. grinning like the woods were calling him personally. I didn't have the heart or the guts to say no. That's how we ended up on Raven Crest Trail, 2 backpacks full of supplies, and me dragging my feet behind him, feeling like I knew something he didn't. The day was perfect, clear skies, warm sun. The kind of afternoon that made it feel like nothing bad could ever happen. But the closer we got to the trailhead, the quieter everything became. Even the cicadas, which had been screeching earlier, faded into silence as we stepped beneath the trees. "Come on, Matt, keep up," Jason called, already a few strides ahead. His backpack bounced with every step, his excitement almost contagious. I sighed, adjusting my own straps, wishing I hadn't packed so much, and followed. The trail started wide and easy, a gentle slope over loose dirt and roots, but it quickly narrowed, walled in by trees so thick their branches tangled overhead. Sunlight barely made it through, leaving long, broken shadows on the ground. I kept my eyes on Jason's back, trying to ignore how the air had cooled, how the faint breeze carried a sour, rotting scent. "Why does it smell like that?" I asked, my voice too loud in the hush. Jason shrugged. "Probably just some dead animal. Relax, man. It's just a trail." But it wasn't. Not really. Raven Crest wasn't on any map I had seen. The stories about it were vague, half-remembered tales from older kids who swore they saw shadows move or heard voices calling their names. I never believed them, not until now. As we climbed higher, I noticed strange marks on the trees. At first, I thought they were claw marks, maybe from a bear. But the closer I looked, the less sense they made, long, jagged lines that crossed and spiraled, too precise to be random. "You see these?" I asked, running my fingers over one. Jason didn't even glance back. Probably just some hiker messing around. "Let's keep going. We don't want to lose daylight." I wanted to turn back right then. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But Jason's confidence was infectious. It always had been. He charged ahead, laughing at the danger, and I followed, too stubborn to be the one to chicken out. By the time we reached Hollow Basin, the sky was streaked with purples and reds. The clearing was wide, surrounded by jagged cliffs that seemed to lean inward, listening. Jason dropped his pack and stretched, grinning. "This is perfect. Look at that view." I slumped onto a flat rock, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. The air was too still, too silent. Jason, as usual, didn't notice. He grabbed his flashlight and slung his backpack over one shoulder. "I'm gonna check out the ridge. Be back in 10. "Wait, what?" I stood, already reaching for my own light. "You're just gonna wander off? It's getting dark." He laughed, that cocky, carefree laugh that always made me feel like a little kid. "Relax, Matt. Just get the fire going. I'll be back before you know it." I watched his flashlight beam bounce into the trees, debating whether to follow. But the thought of being alone in the dark woods was worse than staying put. The fire took longer to start than I expected. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The dry wood Jason packed wasn't catching. By the time I had a small flame going, the sun was gone, leaving only the fire's flickering glow and the encroaching darkness beyond it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The fire crackled, casting shifting shadows across the trees, making them look alive. I checked my watch, my stomach knotting tighter. "Jason," I called, my voice small in the silence. Nothing. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, deeper, their edges sharp and wrong. I gripped my flashlight, turning toward the path Jason had taken. The darkness beyond the fire felt alive, pressing in. "Jason," I shouted again. A sound like a branch snapping came from the woods. Relief surged through me. "About time," I muttered, stepping toward it. No one answered. The fire behind me felt impossibly far away as I stared into the woods. My flashlight flickered, its beam weak against the thick shadows. For a second, I thought I saw something, a figure darting between the trees, but when I focused, it was gone. Something wasn't right. The air was heavy. The hairs on my arms stood on end. The shadows weren't just shifting, they were watching. A whisper, barely audible, "Matt." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Jason," I whispered, but deep down I already knew. I don't know how long I stood there, staring. My flashlight trembled in my grip. The whisper, my name, hung in the air, stretched and wrong. Jason, I croaked. Silence. Then I saw it. Jason's backpack, sitting upright in the middle of the trail. The straps were torn, dirt smeared across the fabric. I crouched down, my hand shaking as I reached for it. Jason. Inside, everything was untouched. Flashlight, unopened water bottle, his old compass, a crumpled map. He wouldn't have left this behind unless he had no choice. Then I heard it again. The whisper, closer this time. I snapped up, my flashlight catching movement. A shadow slipping between the trees. Too big to be Jason. Too fast. Who's there? I shouted. No answer. Just a faint chuckle. Dry, rasping, like leaves crumbling underfoot. Panic shot through me. The flashlight trembled in my grip. That's when I noticed the footprints, leading away from the backpack, deeper into the woods. At first, I thought they were Jason's until I saw their shape. Too long, too wide, too far apart. Not human. My throat went dry. I didn't want to follow, but if Jason needed help, I took a shaky step forward. The trail led to a clearing. A massive tree stood at its center, its bark carved with spiraling symbols that seemed to glow faintly. The earth at its base was disturbed, like something had been buried or unearthed. A torn piece of fabric, Jason's shirt, clung to the roots. My breath hitched. The whisper came again, but louder. Matt. From behind the tree, something stepped out. Tall, thin, wrong. Its face, or what should have been its face, was nothing but a void, a black emptiness that swallowed the light. Tilted its head, studying me. Then it stepped forward. My body finally obeyed. I ran. Branches clawed at me. The whispers turned to a deafening roar. The trees pressed in. When I finally stumbled out of the woods, the sky was pale with morning. I clutched Jason's torn backpack, the straps still damp with something I didn't want to think about. They never found him. I don't know what took him. I don't know if that thing was Jason, or if it was something else wearing his face. But I do know this. I'm never going back.